Okay, welcome to the second meeting of the Blue Ocean Shift online reading discussion group. And today we are going to be focused on part 2, step 1 and 2, getting started and understand where you are now. I'm Jaime Levy, host of this experimental discussion group. And I thought we would start by first having the new participants who weren't here for the first meeting quickly introduce themselves and tell us kind of maybe what they do quickly and why they're interested in this book or in the group. And then I want to quickly ask a couple of the participants to run the next 3 meetings. I'm going to run the last one, and then we're going to start, and David's going to run it. So let's start with the participant introductions.
Okay, should I start?
Yeah, go for it, Mina.
Yeah, so my name is Mina Boström-Nakicenovic. I live in Sweden, so I'm calling from Stockholm now. I have been working with software development for 20 years, mainly as a developer, architect, and lately as a development manager. Now I'm a head of development at one company. We are in gaming industry, so we are delivering gaming solutions. I just joined the company, and before that I worked in financial industry for more than 15 years. So I think that many of my comments are going to be more related to the financial industry than the gaming industry, because gaming is pretty new thing for me. My interest for Blue Ocean strategy, I learned about it for 2 years ago. And when I learned that, I realized that it's not only business strategy, it was my life philosophy. How I try to win a lot of competitions without not being the best one, but trying to find a blue ocean to do something differently. And in fact, I applied that strategy in my swimming competition. I'm now master swimmer. I was a swimmer as a child. Haven't swimming for 27 years and started again 2 years ago. So my goal was to get a gold medal at the Swedish National Championship in master swimming. And I wasn't the best one, but by applying a blue ocean strategy, I managed to achieve my goal. And then I got contact also by Professor Renée Mauborgne. And I think this strategy is really great. It's not only strategy, it's a mindset. And I like the new book. I bought it directly in September when it was published. And one interesting thing is that I'm running the recommended workshops at my company currently. So we reached a little bit further, but a lot of learnings and experience by running these workshops. So it's my maybe not short introduction, but
very interesting though. Thank you so much. Excellent. Okay. All right, and then Ayal, is that how I say it, or Yal?
Hey y'all, I think you're from South Carolina and you say, hey y'all. I'm director of UX at GNA. It's a global firm for museum planning and design. So my main clients are from the museum world, but I do some work for corporate clients as well. I'm from a design background, primarily from pretty diverse design background, including motion design, animation, filmmaking, visual design, and I branched into UX about 7 years ago. My interest in strategy started to stem out of the work that I do with clients, museum clients, especially new museums, helping them define their entity and what is their differentiation factor and what is their value innovation, essentially, the language of the book. And recently became also very relevant to the company that I work in. Since it's a very competitive and narrow field, it will be very interesting to apply this exercise and setting out strategy to see how, as a group, we can reach a blue ocean of clients and operations, especially because it's a very narrow field and the competition is very repetitive. I'm really looking forward to see how I can apply this both for clients and for my own company that I work with.
Excellent, thank you. I think, is Chris here or anyone else new? Nope.
There's
Chris is here.
Hey Chris, were you, I can't remember, were you here for the last one? I think you're new, right?
I'm new. I did watch the video from the last session. So I'm just across the border in North Carolina. So we also say y'all. So I'm a consumer experience manager. I've taken one of Jamie's courses, which is, I think, why the recommendation to join the book club popped up on my LinkedIn. But more so, my journey is evolving into more program management, and I work at a large established manufacturing company. So I work in appliances. So I think this will be applicable to most of the programs that I'll be working on this year.
Excellent, thank you. Is there anybody else who hasn't introduced themselves that would like to? Okay, all right. So before we jump in, my sort of post-mortem listening to the last webcast, I felt that I was doing way too much talking, and the quality of some of the things I was saying weren't as good as some of the others. And so I want to learn to be a better facilitator. So I'm now going to ask for David Rowley to host this meeting 2. Do you agree, David?
I accept the challenge.
And I would like to ask Pete to host meeting 3.
Okay.
And I'd like to ask Melanie to host meeting 4. Will you?
Yep. So sorry, I was muted for a second there.
Notice I'm picking out all the PhDs, and then I'm going to go back and do the last meeting after learning from you guys on how to facilitate a book club meeting. So there we go. Okay, so David, hopefully you can see that we have the questions up here really big, and I'm going to let you go freestyle if you want to, give a high level or whatever, but it's all you, and everyone's welcome to jump in at any point, especially if that's their question and they want to give context. So take it away, David.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Listen, I'm not the best facilitator today, but I'll do a great job nonetheless. Ha ha ha. But the reason is I did not know I was going to be facilitating. Otherwise, I would have read the questions. I would have prepared more. So I'm reading them now with you. Let's take a brief batch of a few segments of a few minutes each. One is we'll review what we covered in the last session in December, and maybe mistakes made and apologies to make. Then we'll move into a review of what we're going to do today, where we don't get into details. We agree that we'll leave questions unanswered, and then we'll come back to everything. It's a way of creating an agenda for us all, so we can, if that's an acceptable process.
As long as you can do it in 5 minutes, because I felt another failure of the last meetings and went 90 minutes and we weren't talking about the questions for a half hour. So I'd rather, you don't need to know what the questions are. The people who submitted them know them and can give context. And I think we should, unless others agree, let's just keep moving forward.
Okay, we're going to move forward fast. But while we skim through the questions, let's take a few seconds to review what happened in the last meeting.
Do it.
Some of us were missing. Okay, there was a moment in time when we said that the book was missing places where it could have made references to previous scientific work or academic work and so on. It's not a big criticism, but it did sound like one at that moment. So I hope the authors will forgive us for having said that, because it's not a serious deal. There's a couple times maybe when we said this was obvious or that was obvious, but all of these things need to be said because it's a process. So if you agree with those two comments, there's a third comment also that came up a couple minutes before we began filming. Jamie said there was a confusion between humanism and humanness, but that's a normal confusion because humanness is a brand new term, essentially a brand new term. So we're all learning as we go because we have not read the book thoroughly in advance. We're reading it as we go. Okay, that's my spiel.
That's great. Okay. All right. Should
So,
we start at the top? Good. Do your call.
Okay, now I don't have the ability to turn on my video for some reason, so you guys can help me to know if you think a segment's going on too long. You turn on your video and I start seeing your heads bobbing around and your shirts moving, and it tells me, time's up. And you can do that to me or to anyone else.
Or just cut him off.
The more activity we see in those little bubbles at the top, the more it means we're ready to move on. Is that a good signal?
Yeah. Can you see the chat window, David, on the right?
Yes.
So someone could just say, "Let's move on," like this.
Okay, good.
All right, let's move on.
Right. Done. So now let's review the questions briefly without answering them, because some of the questions were given by people who are not here. Maybe we want to hold off. They might show up later. The people who are here, their questions should be dealt with first. We might want to reorder them. Who submitted question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example?
I submitted number 1.
Okay.
And I submitted number 2.
All right.
And so the question is also related to number 2, competing factors. So I think it's a good area for discussion.
Okay, good. I submitted, where is it now? A question, which number is it? I saw it a minute ago. The one about finding. There it is, question
Number
5.
5.
Okay, I submitted 5. So that's 1, 2, and 5. Anyone else want to claim a question?
Yeah, I submitted 3 and 4.
Okay, good. So we it looks like we're in the right order and we're here.
Yeah, everyone's here. Let's go for it.
Okay, so in the book, there was a 1 or 2 pages before the section we're dealing with today. In the last section, there's the diagram 4-2. I liked it because it showed a process for what we're doing here today. So if just to let everybody know, we don't yet have an overview of what we're doing. We're in the middle of the book, unless someone's read the whole thing through and through and really understood it all. We're trying to we're in a sense ourselves doing the process. We're all competent and capable, but we don't know where we're going yet unless we've read the entire book. So that's it for the introductions. Question number 1. Was that, did Melanie say that, or was that Chris?
Eyal.
Oh, Eyal was question 1. Let's go. Let's start here.
Shall I?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is regarding the first step in part 2 about choosing the right place to start for the initial map of the settler, migrator, and pioneer. And it's mainly because it seems like he shrugs off the question regarding small startups and company with one endeavor, one product, or one service. And I was left a little unclear about how to handle this, especially because very often these products are not a single entity. They entail a lot of different facets. For example, a B2C program can also have a B2B model or modules that is under the hood, core services, client retention, client services, and so forth. And I'm not really clear. The question is about how to handle this and how to approach mapping. Basically, with all of these operations, should they all be included or not, essentially? Or should there be a way to map it in a different way?
Who wants to deal with that?
Let me hit it first.
I can start.
Oh, go for it. I mean, let me say one sentence. Yeah, agreed that this seemed geared at enterprises who had a product suite or existing products as opposed to new startups. They could evaluate from the standpoint of, is this product, truly innovative, or is it a Me Too product? But it definitely felt like this was more geared to the enterprise world, which the book is more geared to the enterprise world, I would say.
I completely agree. In fact, we did that exercise at my company. and my company has existed for 20 years, so we have a lot of products, and it was a really perfect point to start with. But and it was really too eyes-opening to see how many Me Too products we currently have, and then that we don't have enough pioneers like offerings. So, but the one thing that is really very, very interesting, and I'm happy that you mentioned that, is that B2B and B2C business. Because in my company, we are just doing the technical solutions for gaming solutions and selling to other companies who are selling that to customers. So we have both B2B business, but underlying is end player, customer that we want also to satisfy. And it's really interesting because I think that many examples in the book and that I managed to find is much more concerning B2C, business to customer. But how to deal when you have like two layers of customers, business to business and business to customer. We haven't found a good answer, but all these exercises we did double, both for B2B perspective and B2C perspective. Hello?
Yeah, who's next?
Yes, I'm just thinking, does anyone have any comment how do you experience doing exercises when you have like both B2B and B2C business?
Well, I mean, the quick answer is, to me, as someone who gets asked to work for startups, and then, like right now I have a big B2B company wanting me to come in to do transformation. I think of as from the user experience standpoint and the process standpoint that that the output of the products should be just as like easy to use, and they should be innovative, and they should all work together and have persistent design. As far as the business strategy standpoint, it's different in one major way, and that is when you're B2C, you're selling to the consumer. You're leveraging the consumer using your product so you can sell advertising or whatever. The monetization is directly correlated to the person using the product. While in B2B, the customer and the user are typically two different persons, i.e., it might be the CTO making the decision that everybody's using certain software, and then the end users are the actual employees. So I don't know if that that's just the one distinction that I think of, as far as, are we trying to create, if the company, I think it's easier if we let's throw at a company that we're all familiar with, that's a B2B company, and maybe we could have some context around it. Like Microsoft or Amazon, or I don't know, what's a B2B company?
I can give an example from my own experience, even though it's not tech, where my clients are all organizations and businesses, but the end users are visitors of museums or partners and potential business partners of tech companies, which we also work with. So we always have to think with two tiers. The first one is how do we deliver to the client, which is a business, but eventually who are the users of the products that we create, who are individual people or consumers with the terminology that is relevant to what we're talking about.
Because I think it's really very interesting, when you are focused on finding a blue ocean, should you focus on finding a blue ocean for the end user or for that another company that you're selling your products to?
I mean, I guess I would have one comment, which is that maybe, what delivers value to their users in the end is going to end up making the company, earn more or have satisfied museum goers or whatever the case may be. So maybe in a way, for this kind of analysis, their advice in the book is good to follow, that you should just think about the user. And even if there is an intermediary layer in terms of selling the product and the customer is someone at the company who's buying it, for this kind of analysis, maybe it's better to just focus on the user as best you can.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like it's there's a lot in these in this section about, let's, almost the design thinking, let's get everybody in a room and let's all do a self-evaluation of our product suite and say which ones are me too, which ones are kind of, doing some what they call some kind of innovation. There's a word before it that means slight innovation, and then what's actual true value innovation. And they did talk about, okay, everybody going, it's kind of like when I used to do the dot maps with the clients and say, okay, what's the most, who thinks they have their business unit is core to the vision. This is like trying to get consensus by having everybody in the room actually evaluate all the products together and say which are the ones that are really, pushing the company forward. I mean, we could even look at like Apple, perhaps, as a company doing that, and they could be looking at, is it their Apple TV? Is it the iPhones? Is it their, the entire, the App Store? And that just, to me, it felt like a consensus building tool to try to get people to even evaluate what is innovative about the product suite, and then to say, okay, if these are the 2 or 3 things that are or these are the 2 products or services that we deliver, then should we sort of focus on those and really go in that direction, or should we, try to lift the other ones up but have some sort of spectrum? That was my take on this.
Anybody who's not spoken, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to come back to the idea of whether you're going to focus on, I work at an agency as well, but I can see there's many situations where you have your B2B customers as well as ultimately their customers, and so you're going through your, say, retail clients to get to their consumers. And I think it seems to be worthwhile, at least in the initial stages, trying to consider where you can get value out of both of those customer segments, if you like, because ultimately, yeah, you're designing products for the end user, but if, potentially whoever you're going to have to sell those to might not care that you've just invented the best thing ever, if you as a supplier are rubbish. So I think it seems sensible to say, okay, well, let's see where we can get value out of both things, and then sort of figure out maybe, okay, well, maybe we don't need to develop any more products because maybe there's just, it's so cost intensive to maybe develop new products that maybe we're better off targeting how we can be a better supplier. I'm thinking of the example of Rolls-Royce and their jet engines, like, however many years ago it was now, basically went from selling jet engines to selling, and then just letting their customers get on with the maintenance, to selling maintenance as a service. So they were still trying to, technically advance their engine development, but they totally restructured how they operated as a supplier and really sort of stepped ahead in terms of value. So it seems to me it would be, at least as a starting point, to say, where can we see the value? And okay, let's use that as our sort of reference point and hang everything else we're going to do off that. Because I think, if you're selling to effectively two parties, even if one's indirectly, not thinking about those would seem like you're missing a trick. That's my contribution.
I think.
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to say it's helpful because it gives a different perspective, and looking at different business segments that apply, or that that using the same mental model is helpful, because I'm coming from one place, and it's great to hear your different perspectives.
Thank you, Adel. I want to remember this question to come back to it again later, because I think it's going to be clearer later, and if not, it'll be a bigger question.
Yeah.
Yes, I have one comment, if it is okay.
Yes,
in fact,
please.
2 comments. One related to that, that we should focus maybe on the end user, not even if you're in a B2B business, but the problem is, even if you find the blue ocean, usually such ideas are different, how you can persuade your business partners to buy that and show to them that it will create value for the end user. So it's one problem. even if you believe that it's a blue ocean, a breakthrough idea, how to persuade, to sell it. Mm-hmm. And another thing, I agree that this map is going to be useful later on when we are applying them for actual framework in order to see what should be reduced or eliminate. Because here is not only like which products are Me Too, but it's also the size of revenue that they create. So like if you have a lot of Me Too products and they're not creating the big revenue, they're good candidates to be eliminated or reduced.
Very good.
Oh, look, I found the Pioneer Migrator Settler map from, it's Key Principles of Blue Ocean Strategy. It's actually not new, I guess, for them. There was one thing I just wanted to add, and that made total sense, Mina. And I think it was in the context of the exercise of this map that they were talking about that they should evaluate the value innovation of their products, comparing them to other similar offerings in the marketplace. But that I found this comment interesting, that, it's okay, I was slightly horrified at first, let's bring everybody in the room, and it was almost like doing another SWOT. Let's just evaluate ourselves compared to our competitors, and together agree on whether we have a competitive advantage or not. And this was sort of like, let's evaluate ourselves, saying, okay, is our product, let's say we're like the new, creating a new dating app. Is our dating app better than OkCupid, more innovative than Tinder, and everybody kind of raising their hands. I vote yes, I vote no. And they said in there that this was just as effective, or that compared to, they compared the results of doing collaborative self-analysis in these meetings to doing thorough quantitative research, right? And that the quantitative research only gave it like that 80% of the meetings without actually doing the quant analysis, that it was close enough. And I found that kind of amusing as someone who advocates doing, methodical, but they also did not talk about doing competitive research and looking at numerous factors, and that gets into the next part. So I thought it was, I think it's interesting. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that you got to involve as many members of the team, the product team and the stakeholders, so that they can evaluate their products from the perspective of where we are now, right? Because where we are now is basically the past, right? And then where are we going is going to define their future. And if they want to be pioneering, they need to really understand what is it that they're offering that has the most potential to create an uncontested market space.
Yes, exactly. I think also it's another view on another thing that it's talking a lot when you're talking about innovation strategies, then Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Horizon 1 is where you are, but when it's going well, you should take a look at Horizon 3 to prepare those pioneers that will create a value innovation later on in the future. If you're just focused on what you are now, as Jaime said, it's already past, it's already too late. Like, you have to work in advance on Horizon 3 and pioneers products.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Horizon stuff, is that from business model generation, or do they get that from somewhere else?
I don't know. I don't think so that they mentioned that in the book, but I learned, I don't know where, but I know that many people, when they're talking about business operational models and innovation, they're talking about horizons, but I don't know whose idea is that originally.
Yeah, no, that's a great comparison. Okay, I feel like we pummeled that question to death. David, take it on.
Yeah, well, what we're going to do now is find, from time to time, we might cover a question very briefly, and that'll be fine, because it's normal for the first question to get the most attention. So it could happen that question 5 is dealt with in 2 minutes. We'll see. So question 2, who is that? Is that Minna?
Yes, it's me.
Take it away.
Hmm?
Go ahead and take it away.
Okay. So, it's that step 2, when you're trying to draw your strategy canvas, you start with defining competing factors. And I think it's so interesting how you define those competing factors, because you have one perspective on yourself and on the industry, but it doesn't mean that you have the right perspective, that you have the same perspective as your competitors or as the industry that is reality of the industry. So I think that we also, when we did this exercise, we were really, although you think you know very well about your company and about the industry, all of a sudden you feel so not very sure, is it really competing factors that the whole industry experience that as a competing factor, or it's just from our perspective, not from other people's perspective. So it's one thing, and related to another question related to competing factors is when I apply that on my swimming competitions. I call my strategy for swimming in the blue ocean. I have even my talk and video on the internet, on YouTube, if you are interested to see. But then when I defined competing factors, I felt like I am an expert in that domain. So I really knew, I divided different distances and disciplines that I could swim. So when you are really expert within domain, probably it's easier for you to define competing factors. But on the other side, when you are expert within domain, your expertise constrain you in finding something new. So maybe you're good at defining the current state, but maybe not very good in finding to introduce a new competing factor. You understand what I mean? So it's like two philosophical questions regarding selection of competing factors. But maybe let's focus on the first one, like how do you know that you have the right perspective, that your competing factors are really realistic, that you don't focus on something that no one else in the industry focuses on?
Yeah, hey, Nina, this is Leo. I had kind of a similar question. So I do user experience research and strategy for a company called Impinj in Seattle, and we specialize in RFID, which RFID in itself is an upcoming tech. It's very unique. And Impinj right now is arguably, it's the leader in it. And I find the exact same thing every day. Whenever we look at our competitors or how we think we can, I mean, we don't call it blue ocean, but how we can not get stagnant, not be in that settler category, but be more migrant or pioneer. We're doing all of this in our own echo chamber. And I tried very hard to have them think, don't think about what we know and what we think, try and think about it from the user, but it's so different because it's such a specialized technology. There aren't a whole lot of players, and the people that are in this game are such experts in it that it's hard to not be in your own echo chamber. And that's and I'm running into it, and I don't have a problem for it yet. I mean, a solution for it yet, but as I was reading this chapter, I thought the same thing. It's how to get away from that when so many people are experts in the field and they have so many biases coming in based off what they know. How do we know those are the real competing factors?
I mean, probably the answer is to include people from not the experts, just to invite some people that are completely outside of the, maybe not industry, but outside of your expertise. Or maybe to have different people from company, if it's a bigger company, to invite them from different departments because they have a different perspectives on things. Mm-hmm. I don't know neither what is the right answer.
But I mean, from one point of view, you could also say that just the very concept of the strategy canvas, it has value in that it gets you to think about these things, right? About which are the right competing factors. And does my curve look different from other people's curves? Do I need to look harder to make my curve look different? Like maybe that's it. If you haven't found the factor that makes you look different when you look at your competitors, you got to keep looking.
Right. I'll read the sentences here, and I'm very familiar with this because I took a whole class on Blue Ocean strategy years ago, and I had to plot several of them. They say, before the team settles down to address this, it's important to establish a few parameters. Identify no fewer than 5 and no more than 12. A minimum of 5 pushes the team who say they only compete on price to challenge their assumptions. Basic B2B industries like chemicals and plastics, for example, often fall into this camp because they take it for granted the product they sell is a commodity and argue that price is the only distinction. Conversely, a maximum of 12 factors pushes teams who come up with overly long lists to focus only on key competing factors. The aim is to keep them focused on the big picture. And so I always think from my course that I took at UCLA, we would always use Southwest Airlines as the example. It's like you're competing on, price, and you're competing on frills, and you're competing on the ability, how many hubs, because Southwest Airlines at one point, their competitive advantage was that you could go from LA to San Francisco, but it only flew to like 3 cities, but there were constant flights every other day. But on the downside, it was like they didn't have assigned seatings, but it made it more efficient. But they really it moved the airline industry into a new place where all of a sudden they were starting to rethink how they're going to charge customers. And I felt that my takeaway from it when trying to figure out the competing factors was like, it's really what the distinctions, 2 levels. One, the distinctions, definitely price has to be in there, but also delivery to the customer, like customer value. And then also the value of what it's saving the company in terms of in terms of staffing, in terms of costs. And then looking at really the value innovation in terms of what the customers are getting out of it, so that you could find what is true innovation. Because innovation, the basic definition of value innovation is that it brings the cost, buyer value up, and and then differentiation. What is it? The value innovation, is it buyer? Cost down and value innovation up. Cost down and buyer value up, and they're the perfect example of that. But then you can inverse that with Cirque du Soleil, where we were paying more, but the value to us was different, and they tangented into a completely different market space. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think it's so contextual to these, to every single enterprise or to every single new company to really figure out how are they going to compete in the marketplace, looking at the direct competitors and the indirect competitors and what they are offering. Do they have enough, at least 2 or 3 dots in the high area of the map to really say, hey, I'm going to offer something of higher value or unique value to my customers.
I want to ask a question or pose a question to Chris, to Eyal, to Peter, either the question that's in the chats or any other question, because we're talking about a new topic here, competing factors. Do you have any thoughts on that? So there's 3 people I'm addressing. Who wants to do?
I can start, and it's a little bit more of a methodical process, I think, and I wonder if when you're in a way stuck in your own echo chamber and you can only think about what you can think about, there is a process where you can challenge an idea or some sort of a hypothesis by coming up with others that are not necessarily what you would initially think about. It's as if you add, based on the same factors or the same realities, a few ideas that essentially play devil's advocate, and they are based on the reality and the initial factors that are in existence, but it helps to challenge your initial thoughts that you are in a way stuck with. and it could either work as an elimination. So you do eliminate these and you end up with the same original factor that you've considered, but it's much more established right now. Or you may find that this helps you get out of this echo chamber and come up with these new ideas or hypotheses, although at first they seem to be detached from reality or not relevant. So it's an exercise that you can actually end up with new ideas or new directions that you didn't think about initially. And it requires more people. I mean, you need to bring in new people to come up with these new ideas or new hypotheses.
Very good.
Yeah, I was just going to build on that. I mean, it's a really good point, and I think something else that sort of flows from that is that, you know, even if you are in this echo chamber, effectively what you've created is a useful starting point and some hypotheses, tests. You know, they're only going to ever remain assumptions until you start doing something about it, and then, you know, figure out whether you're on, you know, whatever you do next to sort of push things forward. If you pick a tack and say, right, that's the factor we're going to try and push forward with, you know, you would probably do some sort of small scale work next just to sort of test the water a little bit. So even if you are left with a sort of a relatively high degree of uncertainty, that may still be okay. You're still in a better place than you probably were before, because you've now got something to work with, and then, you know, see if it's actually got any value in it in itself. But I think, you know, as a tool, it's a pretty good way of showing where that differentiation can be, and something different to what I've seen before. So yeah, I think it's got some legs in it, I think.
Hey, Chris, anything to add? Okay, Chris is not answering.
And actually, one thing I was going to say is, as we're talking, I keep forgetting, like, we're just still at the starting point here. Like,
yeah.
So there's a temptation to like jump to like, how do we make the curve different? But this is really just the starting point. That's all that's needed. And so in some ways, even if you are in an echo chamber and you haven't identified all the factors, I'm assuming that in the coming chapters, there's more guidance on that.
Very good. I think this workshop process they're suggesting is one that takes place over several weeks or many weeks. By the way, I found the video button.
There you are.
It was on a small window hidden under the main windows, so I can turn it on and off now. So let's move to question 3.
Yeah, so that was my one, really. I guess maybe it kind of dovetail with what we've just been talking about. Maybe we don't need to talk about it so much, but it was just more along the lines of that, you know, I think it seems like a useful tool. And it kind of comes back to my point I was making in the original meeting, which was, you know, competitor analysis is an important factor, and how does that get addressed? And I think, like Mary just said, we're going to work our way through the book and probably get answers to all these questions, you know, in a week's time. But I think the thing that initially stood out for me was that, yeah, what you are getting is the opinions of people at the moment. And I guess, coming back to the sort of 80-20 rule that Jamie mentioned earlier, which I kind of forgot I read about, you know, it may well be fine, but, you know, that's an average. You know, there are probably going to be some situations where, you know, your room of experts might not be enough, and so my temptation is always to say, okay, well, we've just created this canvas, that's a great starting point, let's go and do some, you know, a quick bit of research to try and see if that makes sense or not. So really, I guess my point was really just this method would seem to seem a lot more powerful if it was paired with a bit of research, either before or after.
I agree.
I completely agree. But I have to add, because now we discussed a lot about competing factors and how difficult it is to choose the right ones. But I have to say that strategy value canvas is so powerful visualization. I mean, you clearly see directly that you are creating, although you believe that you are an innovative company, you can see clearly, like, oh, my strategy value curve converged in the same manner as all other competitors. So I think it's really a great way to visualize things.
And the other thing that we haven't touched on yet about this, and I don't think I'm not sure if I saw it in the questions, but is the humanness aspect to their whole process. that we talked about last time. And there's a lot of value in doing both of these exercises, just from the point of view of the humanness and the buy-in and the getting everyone on the same page.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Yeah.
Sorry, Melanie. Yeah, I was going to say that they mention that a lot of times in terms of bringing people together so they have that shared vision. And when I think probably breaking down silos is one of the hardest things to do, it's really important to keep stressing that message, because it's the strategy is probably only going to work if those silos are dealt with. So yeah, that's a good point.
Can you have something, David, about the listeners, about the good listeners right here?
Sorry, did you say my name?
David.
I'm here.
Their whole step one, what is that going on somebody's computer? It is about getting people galvanized to participate in these meetings to begin with, so that they, and this is like nothing new, is that to have consensus building in an enterprise, especially around stakeholders, is that everybody needs to feel part of the discussion and feel heard. And I felt like that whole kind of step one, there was a lot of time spent on something that, we know is necessary as strategists to do. And so this exercise is maybe just it's something, another exercise that we can do that's better than SWOT, to help everybody understand how to look at this suite of products they're offering, and look at them and say, honestly, with everybody in the room, saying, what are we doing that's innovative and what's not? Did anyone else notice that about step one?
By the way, there's a lot of numbering in this book. So step one, in which chapter, on which process?
Step one, part two.
And then I'm using the ebook, so the page numbers don't correspond. So we'll eventually get there. We're not on the same page.
It's about like constructing the right team.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was just
right.
about that actually, because another thing that stuck out to me when I was reading this was that these can also be tools for figuring out which initiative to pursue, because they let you assess how much buy-in individuals are having, as opposed to even the whole group. So you can identify somebody who's a passionate leader with, fiery, burning passion to take this initiative to the next level, and that can be the project you decide to pursue. I was looking to see where they covered that, but
it's in 106, 107.
Aha.
Are we still on question 3? And is Chris do you want to comment? It's time. You have stage time.
So I was a bit challenged with the get started introduction, and I think overall there's a couple of things to unpack, mainly because I'm in digital marketing, and being in an appliance industry that does not sell direct to consumer, going back to the layers that we talked about a moment ago. So we have our customers, right? We have our consumers, and then we also have this internal agency model where I'm also selling ideas to my internal customers. So it kind of forced me to take a step back and really look at this not so much from a value offering, like a product value offering, but really looking at how I might craft a team and then sell ideas forward. So there's like this other layer kind of going on for me.
Fantastic. AL, anything to say about this? Yes.
No, not in particular.
Okay. I think this question we're handling now is similar to the next question. So let's, if we can combine them, because the next question has something interesting that says, I think the same thing. It concludes with the following words. I'll type them out here. Give an evidence base to this strategy canvas. So if you agree with me, we can move it to question 4, because validating the factors, question 3 about opinions, question 4 sounds similar because the last line says, let's create some evidence. Is my reading of question 4, does it correspond to what we've just been talking about in the last 10 minutes?
Yeah, and I wrote question 4 as well, and it is a sort of a variation of a thing, to be honest. So I think what I was kind of getting at with question 4 was that you kind of define what competitive factors are from an industry perspective, but then you kind of rephrase them from a sort of a customer perspective. And I couldn't quite get my head around it, but I was just, something was like niggling at me saying there might be a disconnect between what the industry thinks it's competing, what terms it's competing against, versus what customers actually care about. And if you go seeking value in what the industry is competing against, you might miss what your customers actually care about. And yeah, so that's how I articulated in a really wordy paragraph. But it all just came back to doing research again. Maybe that's kind of research, and I just love research.
It's a question of point of view, essentially, where you're aiming to identify with a certain point of view, but you're actually missing the important one.
Yeah, I think that's it. And it was just a sort of, not that the method's flawed from that perspective. I think it was just to maybe have go have the conversation of like, okay, this is what we think is important to our industry. How does that tally with what our customers think, and are we okay to proceed, or do we need to include some other stuff on this map as well?
So I have a thought on this, and this is kind of, I was thinking about this during our last question too, but me primarily working in UX strategy and UX research, and also we have a big marketing branch too. So, and this has happened to me in smaller consultancies too, but I always notice a disconnect between marketing and the research they do and the type of research I want to do. And I think this kind of goes towards the competitions, making sure the factors are right, and validating that the market research that we're getting, that oftentimes I find enterprise and big corporations make decisions off of, is actually validated by, say, talking to a few people that use our product. And this is also something that I have yet to find a good way to get marketing completely on the side of UX research and vice versa. I think it's coming around, the more prevalent these terms like UX, user experience, is. But as I was reading this book, I kind of wish they would have talked about that a bit more. Again, I understand that this is more built for enterprise and big, and maybe there wasn't enough time to talk about it, but I'm seeing at least there's almost too heavy of a lean on what's on marketing and research, and not enough done to like validate it before moving forward.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point, Leo. I mean, I saw the same thing from the book as well, that it is just talking about the big sort of enterprise level, or or company level, whatever size it is. You could imagine potentially one of these stakeholders sitting in the room would be head of UX potentially, or at least someone stepping up to talk about UX. So maybe we have to kind of read between the lines a little bit about that, because I guess anyone could read this book from any of the other different, wearing these other different hats.
Absolutely.
But it's a good point.
And to that note, it has definitely. I'm really enjoying this because I'm learning more about, like we're talking about, the more marketing and enterprise-minded way of how to get to Blue Ocean, as opposed to these more very specific UX research books that I read. So yeah, it's all about that. I totally agree.
Who's next? Anybody else want to step in?
Do we hit all the questions? Are we at 7?
No. Okay. We could move to question 5 and 6. I like them a lot. Question 5 is probably the briefest comment We don't need to talk about it. It's my question, and I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if we don't discuss it. People who
I'm running out of time. Excuse me. I may need to hop off in a minute or two.
All right. Thanks for joining.
people who are good listeners and thoughtful and willing to raise questions. Sounds like Integrity Plus. It's hard to know who's. I just find it a bit vague and dreamy to say, well, let's get good people together.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can combine it with the next question. Question 6 sounds like intrapreneurship versus all the rest. Does anyone here own question 6?
That was my question, and I was not specifically thinking about intrapreneurship, although it fits with that too, but just actual like regular startups, and how you would approach doing, especially a strategy canvas, because I really like that tool and I'm more familiar with it, I guess, but also the other tool, and how one could apply those to a startup. And I think by thinking about it for a few days after submitting it, I had a couple ideas about how it could be answered, so I can put those out there and then maybe we can talk about those or other ideas. But one idea I had was one of a startup that I'm working with right now, their product, and sometimes this does happen a lot with startups, their product is sort of a mashup of existing tools, but they're putting them all together and making them easier to use. So like for that, I guess you could take all those different competitors and plot what they're offering, sort of individually, and make an aggregated curve for all your competitors. And then maybe you'd be really high on convenience or cost or something. So that was one idea I had. And then another idea to tackle it that I had was that maybe you could look at things that are not even in your same realm. So like this is a digital product. Maybe you look at ways that people are doing this that are not digital at all, and you plot those on a strategy canvas. So like if you're offering people a really easy way to pay an army of people that manages a property for them, and right now they're writing checks, maybe you plot, the competitive factors of writing checks versus doing it through a new tool. So those were that's how far my thinking got after writing that question. So I don't know if I think about that or if they have other ideas. But so like basically if you're in uncharted territory, you're a startup, you don't have any company that you can compete with head to head, like the examples in the book. How do you go about doing that?
But I don't have any experience. I mean, during the last years from startup, it was a very long time ago. But now I'm thinking usually startup starts because they have some initial idea, and probably they have already analyzed the industry and see like we want to target this group of customers who are getting offerings from these and these companies, and all like these companies, they don't offer things that we offer. So although maybe they should, as you say, they merge all other competitors or other market leaders within that industry that they're entering, but trying to see like what they can do differently compared to them. And I'm thinking also about lean startup methodology. Maybe it's also the way how you can validate your idea with pivot or persevere. You're creating something and maybe creating more often strategy canvas and validate, is your idea going to red ocean or it's blue ocean? So maybe it's just some thoughts. I didn't think too much, but now it just occurred to me when you mentioned. So it's maybe much more tools for validating your initial idea. Is it really blue ocean or it's going to be another red ocean shark in the market?
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. My experience of working with, 50 plus startups is that, and working through the lean startup, as it was becoming popularized, and now as it's becoming finally kind of looked at from a retrospective standpoint, saying, well, is this really actually working? The issue that I always had with it was that it jumped. While I liked it over design thinking because it was about taking Steve Blank's ideas of customer discovery and trying to find out like what's the problem that needs to be solved, and then ideating around that, knocking out an MVP and getting feedback early and often. But then it never really jumped into or mentions anywhere traditional business strategy, perhaps intentionally because of Eric Reese's background. Looking at the marketplace, like just because you have a MVP you think is unique, and even 10 people you talk to or 100 say it's unique, but maybe there's actually a dozen of them out in the marketplace that just failed to market themselves well, and so nobody knows about them. And so I feel like doing a thorough competitive analysis, especially around innovation and knowing what's out there. Like you can't build and create something unique unless you do know what's out there. And if you look at even like my favorite example would be the iPod, with Steve Jobs, like, yeah, he could have heard all this customer research, like, yeah, people are, using the Sony player that I had and all these crappy players for listening to music, but he went beyond that and put together something where they could actually a full experience of downloading the music and organizing the music and that. And making it so small, and if you think of the factors, it basically launched that was like the product that like took them into the future, and I think if he just listened to customers, it wouldn't have been enough, and if he just looked at the marketplace, it wouldn't have been enough. That they really had to, I don't know how they got to that idea of the iPod, but it was definitely somewhere in between.
But I think that's a great example. That's like perfect. That's what I was sort of fishing for when I was talking earlier. Because like, what would the strategy canvas have looked like there? Like, I feel like it would have had to be some sort of a mashup of like, okay, people organize their music currently by having these, large shelves of cassette tapes, or, or they're using digital downloads, but they're highly illegal, putting them at risk. Or they have a bulky Walkman that is much bigger than what we want them to have. Like there was no one product. It was truly like a bringing together of many different things. And I guess the only way to plot something like that using a tool like this is to just say it's okay to do that. To have, your competitor curve be a whole bunch of competitors doing different things.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And use cases. Yeah.
In the case of the iPod, there was a lot of interesting timing, because the Walkman proved there was a need, but at that time there was no high-speed internet except in a few downtown offices. So, for the Walkman. But then when the iPad came out, the world was changing. So people were able to download faster. Things were changing. It's an interesting concept. Don't know if we'll get to that in the book later. That there are moments in time that when it's good to be a follower instead of an innovator. You're still innovating as a follower. I'm not being very clear, but I think you got what I say.
Yeah, and at that time, of course, I guess there were MP3 players, but they were really bad user experiences, and they weren't merged with like an ecosystem of a source to get the music and things like that.
Exactly. There's this book I'm reading that's called Thank You to Be Late by Thomas Friedman that talks about the year 2007 as this timing when everything came together as far as like the cloud, networking, high speed, technology, social media, and I think there are these moments in time where the right product or service timed with, this massive need in the marketplace and this lack. Because all of a sudden people were downloading digital MP3s, and what we were getting, I know mine were illegal, and I wanted to listen to them on the plane. There was no, I don't know how you got them legally at that point, right? You had to take a CD, I guess, and transcode it, but like, I remember the Sony player, I could only have 14 songs on it. It was like ridiculous, and then the iPod just had such a leap in value. And I feel like, however, if it's just Steve Jobs as the genius designer, or if it's a team of people who can come, how can we emulate those kinds of ideas, by looking at these factors from so many different angles than just the obvious ones?
Yeah, so bringing it back to the question, I think unless anybody argues against me, what I'm going to stick with is that if you are really trying to create something completely new, and that is, if that does involve other products that have not all been put into one product yet, or even things that are not digital, I'm going to try to do the curve, but where that competitor curve is an amalgam of other products and ways of doing things. Because I think there's you can get a lot of insight from doing that. Steve Jobs might not have done it that way, but like inside his brain, I think that's what he was doing.
I agree.
You mentioned adapting in your question 6, right? And you're saying this applies to established companies with a history. And am I in the right question here? I think we still haven't discussed how to adapt this to startups. Am I right? Or did I miss something?
Well, I think for me, my viewpoint on it is that it could be applied to startups that are, well, as Nina pointed out, if you're a startup and there are existing competitors, it's not such a hard question. And if you're a startup that's truly creating a new market, a new space, maybe some of these approaches of creating curves from other offerings could work.
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry guys. I was just going to say if you really are starting with a total blank page, maybe you define the factors you want to, not compete against exactly, but deliver, and then see if anyone else stacks up against you in that regard, wherever they come from and however they're doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know how to help startups know where to build, what to build, so that they can have a successful exit and get acquired. Because startups within 3 to 5 to 7 years, they get tired if they're not winning millions. So most startups don't become billion-dollar companies. If they're successful, they get acquired for 10 million or 100 million, which is still a good exit. I wonder if the book is going to get into that.
Yep. That's what's happening now, for sure. Okay, are we on to 7, our last question, and then we can start wrapping it up?
Okay, question 7 is about the terminology and the role of the counselor, consigliere, and this might mean someone who's senior and semi-retired and he knows everybody and everything, but it could mean something else. We'll find out what the term might mean. But who's proposing question 7? Sorry, I've been paraphrasing it. Is there someone here with question 7? Where did it come from? It may just be a comment similar to the comment I made earlier about the fact that finding good people is important. Sounds like a platitude, but here we've got a counselor, and there's not many organizations that really keep these people around or let them keep on roaming, even if they're on the board. The board members are not allowed to roam around the organization.
Yeah, I think the kind of the vibe I got from reading, specifically about this particular role and the wider dream team is that, that's the authors are saying this is what you should aim for. This is like the best approach you can take. But I guess realistically, you're just going to have to aim for that and get as close as you can. But I guess if you tried to start, delving into all the various permutations that your team could sort of turn into, it would be an epically long book. So it seems sensible to say, here's best practice. Do your best against that.
I have just one. Oh, sorry. Are you done or?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Just one comment. I think it's much more focused that, of course, you have to have a good people on the team, but also people from different perspectives. I know in many books about innovation, they recommend to have an anthropologist, someone who can analyze people's behavior. So I think it's also a very important focus to have a people who are taking different perspectives, have a completely different backgrounds, expertise, education, profession, and so on.
Yeah, no, so just to chip in one more comment and then I'll shut up for a bit. But one thing that kind of struck me was that they mentioned it several times, the role of the Blue Ocean strategy expert, and that sounded to me from the questions this person was supposed to be posing that was an external person. So I mean, I guess that, you know, you could go properly external and go to an agency, or you could find someone totally outside of you know, what the team is going to be trying to deliver. So someone that can be the facilitator, because the facilitator seems to be such a key role in keeping this thing moving forward and keeping it open and keeping it honest. I don't know, maybe if you found the same thing doing your process, but you know, whether this conciliary ends up being a facilitator, or because the team leaders seem to me would be a bit too attached to the process to be a maybe a fair judge of that, particularly if they're a really senior person. So yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering who the book was written, who the intended audience was also, and I came away thinking that it was aimed at sort of a do-it-yourself or someone working at the company. And I was wondering about the role of the outside strategist, or whether this was written with that kind of person in mind or not.
I think all of the above. You know, it's for entrepreneurs, it's for product leaders, or stakeholders, CEOs, you know, and then it's also, I mean, I'm right now interviewing for a job where they're bringing me in for a transformation project to basically, you know, realign their workforce so that they can kick out products, and they're intentionally bringing me in because I am from the outside, and to evaluate all their products and help them to put them together and figure out like the best strategy, and also figure out how to, you know, retrain their staff so that they can work together better. And I think, and I hope that we're going to see more of these needs for people who can do these transformations that come in from the outside, because we're unbiased and we can look at everything with fresh eyes, and we can make an advisement. But the most important thing, I did this for Cisco before I hopefully get to do this for this next company, is that we need to understand two things. One is their product suite, and three things. Two is who are all the players are and the bureaucracy in place, and then comes three is their workflow, and being able to transform their workflow so that they are more efficient, they are more collaborative, and they are ultimately knocking out products that are going to create more shareholder value, is why this book, I think, is written, or one of the core reasons.
So I want to come back to this question because I have thoughts also on who they're addressing, but we'll have time next week and every week. Some of these questions are going to be recurring. I think we can suggest also for the future, we could deliberately try to do 5 minutes per question for the first few questions, so that later on we have more time for free form commenting. Some of us next week will have already read the entire book. That'd be good to also check out, because right now probably we're the most lost we shall ever be. It'll get much clearer once we start seeing solutions. That's my hope, or my expectation.
We shall see.
So it's been 1 hour and 20 minutes. Anyone would like to wrap up? I want to thank everybody, and Jamie for giving me this challenge. It's been fun, and we covered everything very briefly. We didn't do as much deep thinking as last month, but nonetheless, we're getting into it, and I know there's going to be a lot. I mean, we've been very critical and even sarcastic, saying who wants a consigliere and how in the world do I find good people? But the authors should not be upset with us. We really like their book. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, authors. Thank you, everybody, for attending this meeting. I feel like it's getting better and better, and I hopefully will be able to save out this webcast and make it public again. And If you have any feedback, send it to me, and I'll certainly take it into consideration. See you next week, same bat time. Thank you so much. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody.
Cool. Thanks very
Thank
much, guys. See
Bye
you
bye.
next week. Bye bye.
See you next week. Bye bye.
Bye.